Okay, we are now looking at prep test number 70, the first logic game. And in this game, we are a concert promoter who is filling the slots at a concert with 6 different bands. So this is a straightforward sequencing game. Our bands are U, V, W, X, Y, and Z, and we are going to put them in the order in which they appear at the concert. So we have our basic diagram. Let's take a look at the rules. So the first rule tells us that V performs earlier than Z. Nice and straightforward. The second rule tells us that W and Z each perform earlier than X. So W and Z are each before X. The next rule tells us that U performs in one of the last 3 spots. So we can say that U equals 4, 5, or 6. And finally, Y performs in one of the first 3 spots. 1, 2, or 3. So let's see what we can do with these rules in terms of some inferences and filling out our diagram in more detail. So first of all, we don't have any conditional statements, so no contrapositives, but we can combine our first 2 rules here and say that W is before X, and so is the chain VZ. We can also start blocking out some spaces in our diagram. So let's look at spot 1. Who could not go in spot 1? Well, Z cannot because V must be in front of Z. X cannot because we have both W, V and Z in front of it. U cannot because U must be 4, 5, or 6. What about space 2? Well, in space 2, we still can't have X because there's too many people that need to be in front of it. And we can't have U because U is limited to 4, 5, and 6. Space 3, exact same scenario. X still doesn't fit there because we need at least 3 bands before X. And U doesn't fit there. What about space 4? Well, in space 4, could we fit X? We could theoretically place W, V, and Z here, but remember that Y also has to go in the first 3. So that means that technically 4 different bands must perform before X, and X can't go here either. Y also can't go here because we're now past the first 3 spaces where it can fit. Space 5, we cannot have Y, because we're not in spaces 1, 2, and 3. And remember now we have to start looking over here at our other options, and we cannot have, well, we can't have V there because V needs to be behind both Z and X. That looks like that's about all the limitations for space 5, but now let's look at space 6. We can't have Y, we can't have V, we cannot have Z, and we cannot have W. So now that we've filled all this out, what we recognize is that the only 2 bands that could perform last are X and U, and thus we have some limited options. So let's go ahead and set up our limited options. So in our first limited option, we've placed X in spot 6. And if X is in spot 6, what else do we know? Well, we know that Y and V cannot go in spot 5, and that's because we need to have at least 2 bands behind V, and Y obviously is only in 1, 2, or 3. We can't have Y in 4, but by this point in time we can place V there. And we can't have U in any of the first 3 spots. And then finally we can't have Z in the first spot because of our VZ rule here. In our second limited option, we've placed X in space, well actually we've placed U specifically in space 6 here. And if U is in space 6, we know that the only other available place for X to go is space 5. Furthermore, in space 4, we know we can't have Y and we can't have V, thus only W and Z could fit there. So we have a couple of options built out here, and we will see how they play out in the questions.